Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. Wizards messed up, guys, but that's not what this video is about. I've got Jund Dragons for you, but I do have thoughts on the overall Monster Hunter, kind of travesty. A lot of people were very disappointed. Now, I don't play Monster Hunter. I saw cool dragons and I went to building decks. That's just what I do. Give me a cool dragon and I will build a Magic the Gathering deck around it. Kind of just a simple person like that. But a lot of the Magic the Gathering community was disappointed in the secret lair, so they're just straight up pulling it. Now, I've still got dragons for you guys, but will this art exist? I really don't even know, but we're still going to build around it. I do have thoughts on, the whole secret lair thing and Universes Beyond overall. I do think they're messing it up, guys. They're messing it up. You gave us a Monster Hunter secret lair, but we're getting a Star Trek set. Now, I'm not hating on Star Trek, but I'm just saying, why don't we have a Monster Hunter set instead of a Star Trek set? Do the Universes Beyond, whatever, they're going to do that anyway, but do the cool ones like Monster Hunter, not Star Trek. Anyway, rant over. Let's get into vaevictis asmadi the Dire. This is going to be a very cool commander, but before we get into it, don't forget to check out Baron of Dice after this video. They're having a 20% off site-wide sale. You get awesome art on your deck boxes. Your deck boxes are high quality. They've got 5 magnets on it, so nothing's falling out of this deck box. And then additionally, whenever you order one of their playmats, they come in one of these hard tubes. Super solid. I am sponsored by them, but I'm just a believer in the product. I like the high quality and I like the art. They commission artists like Ron Spencer, so they're commissioning Magic artists in the community. So if you enjoy the product, go give them some support. Also, you guys can get free $15 whenever you click on that OneNote link, and 10% off all of your Tolarian Library proxies whenever you use code DT4D. But now, let's get into vaevictis asmadi the Dire. This is a 6 CMC Dragon Commander, very expensive. 3 generic, 1 black, 1 red, 1 green. He has flying, and whenever he attacks, each player choose target permanent that player controls. Those players sacrifice those permanents. Each player who sacrificed a permanent this way reveals the top card of their library and puts it onto the battlefield if it's a permanent card. So essentially, it's like a Chaos Warp effect on a commander. You're going to get rid of all of your opponent's key pieces, and you're going to cheat your massive creatures into play while doing it. There's a lot of ways to take advantage of this. Do not get worried about the high CMC value of this deck. There is a lot of ways you can cheat these creatures into play, and there's a lot of ways you can justify a high CMC deck if you have ways to kind of get around it. And in this deck tech, you'll learn how to get to greed for all of those really cool dragons and not have a deck that just bricks because everything costs 7 mana. So let's get right into it. The first thing I want to do is just cover the dragons because I am a huge dragon lover, and then later on in the deck tech, we're going to go over how we can justify including all of these massive CMC creatures in this deck. The first dragon I want to talk about is Vaultborn Tyrant, and yes, for the purposes of this video, this is a dragon. There's going to be some cope in this video, and there's going to be a lot of, oh yes, they forgot to put the dragon typing on this card. It's going to be okay because when you look at the art on this deck, it just looks insane, and it makes me happy every time I open this Moxfield link. Vaultborn Tyrant's going to be insane though, because whenever he dies, you get a token copy of him. He says whenever he enters the battlefield or a creature with power 4 or greater, you get to draw a card and then you gain 3 life, and then again when he dies you get a token copy of him. This is amazing because we're trying to sacrifice our permanents, and being able to sacrifice him and then reanimate him with vaevictis asmadi the Dire's trigger is going to be very, very powerful, and we can just get an entire board state of these Vaultborn Tyrants if we have the right board state set up, and that's just really cool to me. We're also on cards like Ziatora. Ziatora allows us to sacrifice a creature and then we deal damage equal to that creature's power to any target. Then we get to generate 3 treasure tokens, so it is worth it to have some creatures in the deck that just want to die. That way we can sacrifice them and bring them back later. One of my favorite ones is Ohir Kelsum. Again, dragon for sure, 100%. Is the typing on the card? No. Is there cool snake dragons in the art? 100%. So for all intents and purposes, this is a dragon. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to look at that many cards from the top of your library and cheat one directly into play. So it kind of does the cheating into play thing that we're talking about, and you get this for 5 mana. So for 5 CMC, you're digging 6 cards deep and just cheating one of these massive dragons into play. Additionally, whenever it dies, you get to flip it over. It becomes a land, and then you can flip it back over later. So it is very possible to sacrifice it to either vaevictis asmadi trigger or your, Ziatora trigger, and then flip it back over later, and you still get the value without losing any of your creatures. And that's kind of where we get away with running all of these big creatures. We don't really need sack fodder because it's kind of built into the deck. Now, the next dragon I want to talk about is It That Betrays. Now, this doesn't look like a dragon at all until you choose this art. Then it kind of looks like a blob puppy. And what is a dragon if not just a big blob puppy? Am I right? Yes, I'm right. This is a 12 CMC creature with Annihilator 2, and it says whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto the battlefield under your control. So whenever you're attacking with vaevictis asmadi, you're having them sacrifice one per player. So essentially, you're just stealing their best permanents every single turn. That's going to be a fun thing to get off, and it's not going to be fun for your opponents, but fun for you, and that's really all that matters. Now, next on our dragons list, we have Atali and also Atali. Now, both of these are amazing. Yes, they're dinosaurs, but dinosaurs, dragons, remember, they forgot to put a lot of the typings on these cards, and we're just rectifying that right now. So these wingless dragons, whenever they attack or enter the battlefield, you get to reveal the top card of your library and then cheat that directly into play. There's already ways to manipulate the top card of our library in this deck, so having them in this deck is going to be insane. It's just going to add to the synergy, and they're dragons, so why not shove them in the deck, right? Right. Another thing about the other Atali is it is enter the battlefield, but the fact that it's enter the battlefield means that we don't care about sacrificing it, so it's another high power creature that we can easily sacrifice, reanimate, and get the ETB again. So it is useful to have those big creatures that you don't care about shoving back into the graveyard, and then you have your other Atali that you want to stay on the battlefield and give us continuous value. Now, talking about some other dragons in the deck, we have Old Gnawbone and Ancient Copper Dragon. Now, these ones are amazing because they generate a ton of treasure tokens, and we need to be generating a ton of treasure tokens because there is a lot of very expensive dragons to cast in this deck, like the previous ones I've already talked about. Now, both of these are absolutely broken whenever you pair them with Korvold. Now, I couldn't make a Jund Dragon deck without not including Korvold, but Korvold is a little bit broken whenever you get either Ancient Copper Dragon or Old Gnawbone on the battlefield. The deck just kind of is able to draw a ton of cards, cast more cards, generate more treasure tokens, and then you can kind of almost cast your entire library. Korvold's not an okay card, so if you want to power this deck down, you can take him out, but honestly, this deck is hitting that 7-turn threshold that I like to hit, sometimes 6, just if you have an insane turn and cheat massive dragons into play, you can win a little bit faster, but I think the deck is doing what I want it to do at the turn it's doing it at, but I will say the interaction between Korvold and Old Gnawbone and Ancient Copper Dragon is just insane, because he allows you to draw a card whenever you deal or whenever you sacrifice a permanent. Now, whenever you're sacrificing a treasure token, you're not only drawing a card, you're netting a mana. And then you also get to put a 1/1 counter on him. So he's going to get massive. You're going to draw a ton of cards, and eventually you can just use your power synergies to generate mana equal to his power, and then you can recast him from the graveyard using our Jund graveyard synergies, and it does kind of get to a point where you can cast your library. Like I said, this synergy is broken. If you want to power it down, you can, but I think it's doing what it needs to do the turn it needs to do it, if that makes sense. One of my favorite dragons that doesn't get to see a lot of play because it's weird is perfect in this deck. It's a 7 CMC dragon with flying, and whenever one or more dragons you control deals combat damage to a player, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the damage into your hand. That's very good because that will trigger per player. So if we have 3 dragons and we send all 3 of our dragons at 3 different players, we're cheating 3 different permanents into play, and that's where the power of this card really lies. Another card is Clouth Unrivaled Ancient. This is a 7 CMC dragon with flying and haste, and whenever you attack, you get to add X mana if any combination of colors into your mana pool, where X is the power of creatures attacking. Now, you can't use this to activate abilities, but that's okay. We've got massive dragons to cast with this. Utvara Hellkite is also amazing in this deck. It says whenever a dragon you control attacks, you get a 6/6 red dragon creature token with flying. Not only is that absurd with Terror of the Peaks that deals damage whenever a creature with high power enters the battle, and last but not least, our last dragon is Rakdos the Muscle. This is another one where we're kind of being a little bit liberal with the term dragon, but I see horns, I see wings, you know, what else does a dragon need? So I'm all for it. He says whenever you sacrifice another creature, you get exile cards equal to that creature's CMC from anybody's library. We can choose ours library, we can choose our opponent's library, and this is just going to be insane whenever you pair it again with the Ancient Copper Dragon or Old Gnawbone or even Clouth. There's a lot of ways to generate a ton of mana in this deck by dealing damage to our opponents. So now we're able to sacrifice those big creatures, exile the top cards of our opponents or our library, get whatever we need, and then win the game off of that or deal with the problem. This guy's incredibly powerful in this deck because it's just kind of a passive ability. Whenever you sacrifice any creature, it's going to trigger, and that's just going to be super useful in this deck. Two more dragons. We have Colossal Grave Reaver. This guy says whenever he enters the battlefield, you get to mill 3 cards. And then whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you get to put that directly onto the battlefield instead. Now, this guy goes insane with the next dragon we're going to talk about, which is Doom Whisperer. Again, little liberal here with the term dragon, but I see wings, and that's all I care about. Horns too. Wings, horns equals dragons. Unless we're talking about a Tali, and then, you know, we have to do a little bit different things, but we're talking about Doom Whisperer right now. This guy has flying, and pay 2 life, you get to surveil 2. So whenever you have Doom Whisperer and Colossal Dreadmaw on the battlefield, you can surveil 2, and as long as there's a big dragon in there, you get to put it into your graveyard, and then Colossal Grave Reaver sees that and puts it directly onto the battlefield. Absolutely insane synergy here. Pair that with Terror of the Peaks, you're probably killing the entire table. Now, I will note, even without Colossal Grave Reaver, Doom Whisperer is amazing at setting up the top card of your library, so you always know what you're reanimating with vaevictis Asmadi the Dire. So there's a lot of commander synergy with this as well. Now, let's talk about cheating creatures into play, because we are not going to hardcast these dragons, and that's why the deck is able to function. If you just have to hardcast all of these 6 and 7 CMC creatures, the deck's not going to function. So we had to make the deck functional, and to do that, we have to cheat these creatures into play. Monster Manual's simple. It enters the battlefield, and then we can pay 2 to put a creature card from our hand directly onto the battlefield. It also has a pretty cool ability to pay 3. We can put it on an adventure, and then we get to mill 5 cards, then return a creature card milled this way into our hand. So it's really good at finding creatures, and it's really good at just cheating creatures into play. Another one that I really like is Eldamri. This guy allows us to tap 2 untapped creatures, and then we get to cheat another creature into play. So you tap him, another creature, and then another creature, so 3 creatures get tapped here, and then you get to cheat one of your massive dragons into play. Additionally, he says you may look at the top card of your library, so that's really good at knowing what's going to come off vaevictis Asmadi's trigger. And then last but not least, it says you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. So if we have an elf on the top of our library, we don't want to cheat that into play with vaevictis Asmadi, so we're going to cast that and then see what's under there again. So information is the key to this deck working, and cheating creatures into play is the key to this deck working, and this card does both. Another card that does both is the Grim Captain's Locker. This is a 4 CMC legendary artifact that says surveil 1. You can also tap it, and it says until end of turn, creatures in your graveyard gain escape 4 CMC, 3 generic and 1 black, and exile 4 other cards. So amazing in the late game to start cheating out the creatures you need, and then in the early game you get that surveil ability to kind of get some more information on what we're cheating into play with our commander. Sneak Attack is also amazing. You have to use this art because if you look past the fire, there's actually a dragon hiding behind the rocks. I missed that several times looking at this card, and the second I saw it, I was like, okay, that version of Sneak Attack has to go in this deck. And this deck's going to be a little bit more expensive, but we splurged on the art, guys, so don't worry about it. This is an enchantment that says we can pay 1 and put a creature card from our hand onto the battlefield. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the end of turn. This is really good with our commander because 1, we can cheat creatures into play to just sacrifice. Maybe they've got an ETB we want, like a Tali, or we can cheat something like an old Gnawbone into play, generate a ton of treasure tokens, and then we don't care that old Gnawbone's gone. Now, there is some other ways to manipulate the top of our library. One of the best ones is Haunted Crossroads and Ha-Tua. I don't know how to say that card, but this guy basically does what Haunted Crossroads does, but you have to tap them. Both of these allow you to put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So you're discarding these cards, you're milling these cards, you're reanimating them with vaevictis Asmadi by putting these on top of the library. You also have Volra's Stronghold. Now, this is a $100 card, but proxy this, and it's amazing in this deck because it's a land that says you can pay 2, tap it, and put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So another solid way to guarantee that we're cheating something broken into play. Sylvan Library, at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to look at the top 3 cards of your library, so you can kind of set it up to cheat a massive creature into play. And if you don't see a massive creature, you pay 8 life, and you get to draw 3 cards. So this is just a good card in the deck in general. Last but not least, we have Scroll Rack. Scroll Rack will allow us to exile any number of cards on our hand and then draw that many cards and then put those cards back on top of our library. So essentially, we're paying 2 mana, we're putting a giant creature on top of our library, and then we're drawing a card. So pretty useful here. It's not card advantage unless we can get that card off the top of our library, but it is very, very powerful card selection, and it does just set up the top card of our library with a broken creature. Another card that's just super useful at getting those massive creatures out of our hand is Fauna Fauna Shaman. Fauna Shaman has an ability where we can tap it, discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, and put it into your hand. So you're taking something like a korvold, throwing it out of your hand, tutoring up an elf, that way you can start ramping, right? In the early game, it finds you your key ramp pieces, and then in the late game, it finds you those broken dragons that you need to get into play, and you can just hard cast them at that point, right? We are on Goblin Engineer loops in this deck. This just makes a deck super consistent. Goblin Engineer enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for an artifact, put it into the graveyard, and then you can actually tap him, sacrifice an artifact, and reanimate a 3 CMC artifact or less. So this can find your scroll rack, it can find Brass's Tunnel Grinder that enters the battlefield. You discard X cards, then draw X plus 1 cards, so it's really good at getting those creatures out of your hand as well. We're also playing Cursed Mirror in the deck, which is a 3 CMC artifact that enters the battlefield and comes a token copy of a creature. So being able to copy something like an Atali ETB over and over with this guy is also super broken. So there's just a lot of synergy to be had here with the Goblin Engineer. And remember, the Cursed Mirror can also enter in as a copy of the Goblin Engineer, and then that Goblin Engineer is going to get haste. So you can kind of do some weird stuff where you find all the 2 CMC, or sorry, all of the artifacts you need, and then put them into your graveyard, and then you can start reanimating the 3 CMC or less ones with the Goblin Engineer. Goblin Engineer loops are just my favorite way to sneak in a little bit of a card draw engine in these decks that need to get those big creatures out of their hand. The Great Door is also awesome. It's a 3 CMC legendary artifact. We can draw a card and discard a card, which is good for discarding those giant creatures in the early game, and then in the late game we flip it over and it allows us to add X mana of any color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So early game gets those big creatures out of the battlefield, and then in the late game it allows you to add a ton of mana to your mana pool to hard cast those big creatures. And that's kind of the yin and yang of this deck. You need a good amount of ways to get those big creatures out of your hand, ways to cheat those big creatures into your hand, and ways to fix the top card of your library. And then once you add all of those together, you're left with a deck that looks like it shouldn't work, but it actually works pretty well. With that being said, guys, I'm going to end the video here. If you have any questions about the deck list or the deck, be sure to ask in the comment section down below. Don't forget to check out Baron of Dice with their 20% off deal. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving. I will see you guys in the next one.